What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on Cannabis, and if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great episode for you today. We have our guest Carla, and we're going to be talking all about microdosing. So if you want to learn about microdosing and exploration and how all these things can help you, just stay tuned. We've got a great episode for you today. But before we get too far into it, I need to give some folks some shout outs. First off, shout outs to everyone in our Cannabis community. We live stream these interviews basically every Sunday. We do our interviews for the channel. And when we do our live streams, we have folks in the chat. They can ask questions. And we do giveaways to folks that show up and giveaways in general for our community. So if you want to be a part of that, search Cannabis in the App Store and join the community. And you can use the code GROWERSLOVE for 50% off, and we appreciate your support. Also, shout out to lostcoastplanttherapy.com. If you need some spray to knock down bugs, botrytis, powdery mildew, things like that on your plants, check out lostcoastplanttherapy.com. It's a great spray that JR and I both have used, and we really appreciate their support, so please support them back. And then last shout out on my end, I'm going to throw it over to JR. Shout outs to our friends over at SacredThreeMushrooms.com. If you enjoy the kind of conversations that we're going to be having today and you want to explore growing your own fruity spores and things like that at home, you should check out SacredThreeMushrooms.com. They have these Tupperware grow kits that you can grab, and they can even hook you up with spores so you can grow some fungi at home. And then last shout outs, I'll throw it over to JR and then he can kick off the episode.
I want to shout out for TikiSeeds.com. Tiki's got some great apparel over there, and I rock his gear. It's really comfortable, and he's got some cool stuff there. And he's also doing a holdover for his sale that he did in March. So the same sale applies again this year or this month of April, and he's going to be doing some drops. And while I'm at it, I want to also mention that Tiki was kind enough to throw down for Cannabis to get a new booth, so we can have a booth at the OG Hempire Invitational, and it's a cup for Oregon grassroots rec growers. These are folks that are competing a bit against the big dogs, and we want to give us all a chance to shine. So we're all going to get together on 420. And you can get tickets at Cheechable.com. And I really want to thank Tiki for his support. Him and Brad and all the folks are going to be sending gear and stuff to be given away. So come by the Cannabis booth. It's going to be a good time.
Awesome. Well, JR, let's see. We our guest today is Carla. We're going to be talking all about the benefits of microdosing for dietary, medicinal, and spiritual healing. Sorry. And Carla, you also have an upcoming film project, things like that. So we're going to dive all into it. But first, the way we like to start our show is, first off, kind of introduce yourself a bit to folks that are watching or listening. And then also, we'd love to hear how you fell in love with the plant, or in this case, fungi, and how that kind of led you to where you are today.
So, hello, everybody. I'm very honored to be invited to be here with you guys. This is something I'm really passionate about. So I jump at the opportunity to share what I know, and as always, to learn more, because this is a burgeoning science. So everything, much like 20 years ago in cannabis, where you're just starting to isolate different compounds and understand its actual medical benefits. We're in that exploratory stage with psilocybin and microdosing right now. So I'm excited to be here.
So now you, Carla, you kind of got started in the cannabis community, helping out folks and helping yourself. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm a cancer survivor. I was also about a little over 10 years ago, a single mother. I found out that I had cervical cancer, and I didn't really have a support system where where I was in a position where I could pursue like radiation or chemotherapy. So instead, I opted for a radical hysterectomy, which is basically, it hollowed me out like a pumpkin. Everything feminine, including my ovaries, were taken out along with like a quarter inch of the surrounding tissue. Pretty invasive process. And so at about 42, I went into menopause overnight. During this process, it was really important to me to keep the cancer at bay in a natural way because I didn't have anybody to take care of my children for me. So I started growing. I became a caregiver and took on 5, patients or however Washington wanted to classify them. And through, just networking as everyone else does in the cannabis community, learning about medicine, at the time there wasn't a whole lot available to me personally, or at least that I was able to find about like the best medicinal cannabis strains or whatever. So I chose to grow all Jack hair. That was, to me, that was the medical strain. That was, in my mind, that's where it was. And I mean, ultimately, I got, intimately involved with doing concentrates and, not like some growers because of, seeking that high potency, but more because I was making medicine and I was also doing it while legally, there were the barriers at that time that a lot of people didn't understand, just like, like while it was legal for me to grow, it was not legal for me to dispose of all of my like root balls and trim and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's not also illegal to just randomly go out into the forest and dump, which is ultimately what I had to do for years. It was just like I got into the woods and dumped my root balls and my trim and shit. A friend of mine told me about running your trim and your popcorn and that kind of stuff. So I started making concentrates. And that's when I found the research about, non-activated cannabis or THCA being the active, cancer fighting compound. And I started doing, like topicals and edibles and stuff like that with concentrates. And that was all great for cannabis, for cannabis and my introduction to plant medicine. But during all of this, without my ovaries, I was going through menopause. And, there's not a lot of, it's really sad. There's like this big disconnect in medicine and women's medicine. So, while while everyone understands that women go through all these psychological things during menopause, nobody really explains to you like why that is. Like everyone just wants to attribute it to like the loss of estrogen, but they don't explain that the woman's brain uses the chemical estrogen to transmit electronic messages. So basically, we use estrogen in our brains for the thinking process, which is exactly why men and women think completely differently. Like the way that your brains and the way that our brains function is actually scientifically different. So when a woman is going through menopause, her brain basically has to rewire itself to transmit electronic messages in a whole new and different way, right? I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us don't handle it very well. We go batshit crazy, right? I mean, and that's me. That's what happened to me. I mean, they might as well have scrambled my brain like scrambled eggs. So the cancer is gone and I'm taking care of my body and I'm trying to take care of my family and my mind is going completely fucking crazy, right? Like I can barely parent my kids. I went from being, high-powered executive type of person who held jobs with lots of responsibility, lots of moving parts, to like basically, I managed a bar, which is like the lowest, like one of my lowest employment points in my life or whatever. So I'm like managing a bar, having a hard time taking care of my kids, just trying to keep it together. And I met Sebastian, Steph Carosi, ran a booth up at the farmer's market. And, I would get all dressed up just to go up to the farmer's market every Saturday, sit down and talk vegetables and cannabis with Chef. And, we did end up together and we decided he encouraged me to go back into the woods, which is something I've done a lot of times over the course of my life, and pursue plant medicine further than just cannabis. And so he and I took my 2 teenagers up into the Dark Divide. We were about 15 miles past all services, no running water, no electricity, no cell service, no satellite, no, I had a flushing toilet. Absolute had to be. I mean, that was a must. But for the most part, we would come down into the city to go to take the kids to the library. We pursued plant medicine. He encouraged me to like really get in touch with something that seemed to come naturally to me. So again, the beginning of me and microdosing is me thinking that, foraging wild psilocybin and taking small doses, that was my first experimentation with microdosing. But that turned out to be not the most effective way to do it, right? So we were actually helping to host an event during the pandemic out in Colorado. And I met with a woman whose name is also Carla. She was, and I haven't kept in touch with her, but she does hempway foods. She made like hemp organic foods, vegan foods. And she gave me a microdose that was a blend, much like most people, the Stamets stack, right? It's, in case anybody's not familiar, the Stamets stack is psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin. That's pretty much an industry accepted microdose formula. But while it was an absolutely wonderful couple of days with those microdoses in a really stressful situation, I mean, hosting a food event during the beginning of the pandemic was just like top-notch crazy. And I'm reactive to niacin, so I did have some negative effects to her microdoses, but I knew that that was like the aha moment for me when I realized that just a small amount of psilocybin does not amount to microdosing when you're speaking in terms of like health benefits, and when you have an outcome that or a goal in your mental and spiritual well-being that you're searching for. Just small amounts of a psilocybin microdose psilocybin isn't going to get you there.
I would agree with that. I would say that it's more like daily maintenance to kind of keep things on the level, where I think if you need to do more therapeutic type journey, then you need to be looking at maybe, much larger doses. And so you kind of talked about those blends, the Stamets blends. Can you kind of talk about what's kind of going on overall brain health wise as your body's kind of coming into this new thing with the blend of niacin with psilocybin and the other turkey tail and
the lion's mane. So lion's mane and psilocybin are the two. No matter what, if you're going to be doing a microdosing blend that has psilocybin in it, don't forget the lion's mane. It's two combination is the go-to, right? I mean, you can seek a lot of added benefits, balancing brain chemistry and a lot of other things that we're going to go into in a little while. But ultimately, lion's mane and psilocybin is the combination that is known to regrow, actually is neural regrowth, like it actually regrows neurons and neural pathways, right? Because initially when science thought that depression and anxiety were basically just linked to like serotonin and dopamine, right? But what they're really starting to understand now is that it's more about, let me see, it's GABA, which is, I don't even want to get into big, like complicated definitions and everything, but there's over 100 neurotransmitters in the brain. And the two that we're really wanting to work on or the one that we're really trying to work on specifically with psilocybin is our GABA receptors. And we're doing a little bit with our glutamate, but ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a little bit of neural and neuron regrowth, but a lot of like brain chemistry balancing, right? Because it's all tied together. It's an organ that functions with all these different complicated systems that are working in conjunction with each other, right? And what we're trying to do with, or what I'm trying to do with my microdoses is address the health of all of those functions of this organ, right? So, brain chemistry, neurotransmission, all of that kind of stuff. And traditional antidepressants basically don't do any of that. For the most part, what they're doing is they're regulating our serotonin uptake and inhibiting all kinds of, so it keeps our serotonin levels not above a certain level and not below a certain level, which is why most people who are taking, traditional antidepressants complain that while they don't have these deep-seated sadness anymore, they also can't experience great joy, or the inability to truly grieve at the death of a family member, the loss of their libido and their sex drive. Like all of these things are horrible side effects of taking traditional antidepressants that we're trying to avoid completely, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that I'm trying to do with my blends is, because I was so negatively affected by the niacin, and there are a lot of people that are medically sensitive to niacin, right? I actually tried to replace the immune support, the digestive aid, and the important traits that niacin had by doing a blend of other, beneficial medicinal mushrooms. Specifically in mine, I use chaga, turkey tail, and reishi, right? So while niacin is great for some people, and that's an easy, blend or whatever, what I'm trying to do is achieve the same results without any discomfort or any medical interactions, right? Like, because niacin has some medical interactions too. So we're trying to avoid all of that. We want it to be easy to digest. We want it to be effective at helping us.
I have a problem with flushing.
Yeah,
the
me
niacin.
too.
I have really bad flushing with that.
Oh, even the tiniest little amount, I do, because I think everybody flushes a little bit or heats up a tiny bit or whatever. And I'll get like straight up rashy, itchy. I don't see the benefit in doing that every morning when I can achieve, at least in part, the same effect by adding more beneficial mushrooms, right? And the added benefit of these things is that, two of these mushrooms that I've added in are also cancer fighting, because again, all of this stems back to where it all started for me. I'll always be trying to add cancer fighting, regimens into my health in every way, in my food and the products that I put on my body and the way that I, all of it, right? So my microdoses, the chaga and the turkey tail specifically are known to help fight cancer. So those are, so the really wonderful thing about a microdose that is about your overall health is that if you blend it properly, it helps you with a lot of other things, right? So these help lower blood pressure and lower blood sugar, and they help with managing stress. Reishi is great for regulating sleep patterns, so it helps you sleep better at night. All of these things in small parts also help contribute when they're off to your depression and anxiety, right? Because if we're not sleeping well, then we're not thinking well. If we're not eating well, then we're not, then we feel like crap. If we feel like crap, then our overall mental health does not, you know what I mean? All of these things affect us, right? So ultimately, my microdose was designed for overall health. It has psilocybin in it. It has the lion's mane in it. It's got the turkey tail, the reishi, and the chaga in it. And for a total impact. And all of these mushrooms have been known to work better in conjunction with each other. Like they boost each other's effects, right? They're synergistic. They prop each other's properties up and make each other more powerful.
So if someone's interested in the mix that you were just talking about, do you have like a post online somewhere? Just where could I, like, if I want to know exactly how much of each mushroom I should include in this mix, where would I go to learn about that?
So I can send it to you, but also I'm happy to share what I do. Like my point from the beginning has been that while Stamets was my inspiration, his blend is great for some people. It wasn't good for me. My blend may not be good for everybody. I have no compunction about sharing my recipe with everybody here because, you know, I'll explain how I've also, you know, I actually have a line of 7 different microdoses at this point, because while all of them, with few exceptions, have 100 milligrams of psilocybin, what most people are not taking into consideration is the potency of the mushroom that they're using for their microdose, right? Because 100 milligrams of golden teachers is a whole heck of a lot different than 100 milligrams of penis envy. And one feels a whole lot like a microdose and the other does not feel like a microdose at all for some people. Right. So there's a lot when we're talking about making our microdoses. There are some things you have to take into consideration too. And one of the top ones is the strains that you're going to start with. Right. So I believe the Stamets stack called for 200 milligrams of psilocybin. All of my microdoses only use 100 milligrams. Right. But my microdoses range in potency, right? All from the golden teacher, which would be like my least potent mushroom, all the way up to like the enigma, which would be my most potent microdose, and the exception to the 100 milligram rule because the enigma mushroom is so potent that I only put 50 milligrams of the enigma into those microdoses.
And can you kind of talk a little bit how, like with cannabis, each plant has its own chemistry and its own genetic expression.
Right.
Can you kind of talk a little bit about those expressions and then maybe how they build into the entire entourage of
Yes.
what you're blending?
Right. So so I love this about mushrooms because it is very much like cannabis, right? You know, like the buzzwords for cannabis are always like terpenes and THC, they're acids and that kind of stuff, right? But what we're talking, but the compounds we're looking for in mushrooms are actually alkaloids mostly. Right? So we're looking for these alkaloid compounds. And it is absolutely true, the entourage effect with a mushroom is much like cannabis, right? Because a lot of the strains that I ended up taking into my line of microdoses had ended up showing added characteristics, right? Because I'm not a scientist. I don't have a medical background. What I have is a slight distrust of the medical community, and I've had a couple of serious medical conditions that I was able to blend both natural and traditional medicine and have very good outcomes, right? That's all it is. And I never ever, when I started making microdoses, I didn't start making microdoses to give microdoses to other people. I started making these microdoses for myself, and I shared them with my friends and family, and my friends and family shared them with their friends and family. And after a while, I had a very large network of people that I was making microdoses for. And I mean, I was at this point, I make thousands of microdoses. And I'm extremely proud of how many people that I'm able to help and how wide my network is, because what you won't find is me on Instagram or Facebook posting about talk to me on, I don't know what those weird chat apps are. I don't have any of them, but you know what I'm talking about. All the chat.
Yeah.
Contact me on whatever to buy my shit. That does not happen to me. What happens to me is people come up to me at a party and they're like, listen, you saved my sister's marriage. I want to talk to you. You know what I mean? Like
That's
what I
cool.
get is letters from people who tell me that they couldn't stand to be in the same room with their 16-year-old daughter. And a year later, their whole family is microdosing, and her daughter embraces her every night before she goes to bed. That's what I'm here for. That's what's important to me, right? Like, it's not about selling microdoses. It's that I'm probably never going to have a job in the outside world where I'm going to be like, where they're going to have a plaque for me, or where people are going to say, remember that chick that invented that thing? That is not to be me. What's going to be me is that people are going to remember me someday for getting them off of antidepressants and of helping them, navigate this completely effed up world that we live in right now.
Find more equilibrium. Yeah. I was,
Right?
was curious, and this is maybe a little selfish because it's kind of impacts my family, but I've found in my family a lot of folks experiencing fibromyalgia and things like scleroderma and things like that. Do you run into folks that are using microdosing to help with those sorts of disabilities, or is it more like
So
you're
yes.
saying? Yeah.
So listen, what we're talking, you like your brain consists of a whole bunch of neurons, right? But
Right.
neurons are just nerves, and neurology is all just a system, right?
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is a disease of the neurological system in some form or fashion. And psilocybin isn't treating, like we were talking about, like a serotonin or a it's not regulating
Like a dopamine
chemical disorder,
Yeah.
right? Or dopamine, right? Instead, what it's doing is it's regulating a system. It's repairing damage to neural transmission, right? And what is neuropathy or those types of conditions but a breakdown in neurotransmission, right? So yes, there's lots of medical research being done. I follow a lot of good studies. Again, I don't have a medical background, but I do have a college education, so I can read a good peer-reviewed study, a paper that has 200 plus participants and is peer-reviewed, right? I understand how to follow the science of something I'm passionate about. So yes, absolutely. And one of the strains that I use in particular, one of the reasons why I even had to link up with people here in the community to help me keep the strain available to me, because it was just, like cannabis is, where everybody's always trying to cross this strain with that strain, get the most, THC, wants to have the highest CBD, want to get a purple bud, whatever the F they're looking for when they're crossing their shit that time. Right? The same is true with mushrooms. And every guy out there is a renegade mushroom mycologist, right? Like every dude out there thinks that he's invented a new strain of penis envy. It's like stabilized for like 2 or 3 things, and then they start selling cultures to people, right? So there's a lot of like flash pan stuff that's happening in the mushroom market that I have to try to keep away from. The strains that I end up settling on, the reason I settle on them in general is because they have a traditional, like there's research, like specifically the strain that I started with, Golden Teachers. It's one of the most prevalent strains in medical research on the use of psilocybin for mental health disorders, right? So that would be the logical first
Jump off point.
psilocybin,
Yeah.
right? But the strain specifically that I'm talking about is the Rusty White, and it was like a flash pan. It was popular for a little while. It's stringy. It's not big and bulky like most of the people who are growing mushrooms seem to be looking for sometimes. Like they're always looking for little penny bun types of things. This was kind of a straggly, big parasol type of mushroom. It's called the Rusty White, and it has like all of these added anti-inflammatory properties. And I'm talking like people who are 70 something plus years old, who are experiencing, what is natural neuropathy in the feet that's, bad enough that it's difficult for them to sleep at night, because as soon as they're off their feet and they get up and their feet are up on the bed, pins and needles type of stuff, he's running again. He used to run marathons. The gentleman I'm speaking about, he's running again. And he's had not the cessation of, but it helped with his, neuropathy or whatever. So, and there are other specific cases of people that I've worked with that strain that showed like great improvement. There are other strains that have different alkaloids in them, and I wouldn't even be the first person that could tell you what it is in these strains that are different. It's not like I can be like, there's more linalool in it, so it's going to, make you more sleepy. It's not, the science isn't like that for me in the same way. It's not as easily and readily available for me on mushrooms as it is for cannabis, right? I mean, at the beginning of that, we're going to talk about making true albino teachers today. So I can tell you a funny story, but ultimately, and you'll have, I believe we sent you a printout that has the information about the true albino teacher, right? But again, this is just, it's almost like a flash in the pan. It's not like you have to like follow these popularity strains, but when you find something that really works medicinally, then you have to reach out to these growers and be like, can I contract you to just make this available to me? I need like this much available. I can commit to buying this much of it from you. Can you please just keep growing this mushroom, even though it's not the most popular thing? You're not gonna be able to go on Instagram and sell more of it. That has to be, that's a struggle sometimes with.
I think there's some common parallels in that with the cannabis community. Like for myself, I've really focused my roots back into the medical side of things because that's where everything got started.
Right.
All of everything you are experiencing in the cannabis community was built on the back of sick people and hurting people and people who gravitated for psychological relief. And I would almost bet that that's the same parallels that are happening in the fungi community as well. And another thing I wanted to touch on is the open source side of things. I think that's one of the good things that we always push here on Cannabis is open source, in that we reveal how we do things because we want to help lift everyone else in the community up. If you can save one person from suffering, then you can go to bed feeling a lot better about yourself. And so
I want to follow through on that note before I forget, because ADHD is real. So 100 milligrams of psilocybin, 50 milligrams of chaga, 50 milligrams of reishi, 50 milligrams of lion's mane, and 50 milligrams of, what's the one I forgot, guys? Turkey tail.
yes.
Right? So there's the 5 blend that I work with. 100 and then 50, 50, 50, 50. Take it, do with it what you will.
Awesome. That's thanks for answering that. JR, I noticed you had a really good question about memory, but I wanted to make sure that you asked.
Yeah, well, I noticed like over the years using cannabis and even kind of going through certain traumas and pain cycles, things get pretty fragmented in my brain. And I've noticed since I have been using the microdose, since my cancer experience, that a lot of those fragments are starting to come together a little bit. I'm starting to make connections into my memories so that my words can come out right. Because I know for a lot of people who have memory issues, you'll find there are people who like to interrupt. And the reason they interrupt is because they're afraid they're going to forget what they were thinking, and that thought's going to be gone forever. And so I'm always grasping. And sometimes when I go through an 18-hour pain cycle at an 8 or a 10, I come out really confused. My cognitive shit ain't right. And so I'm finding that these blends, because I cheated and I just bought those 4 blend of the turkey tail, reishi, chaga, and lion's mane, and then I just add my own homegrown.
Hey, I mean,
psilocybin.
ultimately, there's not. However, you end up getting to the same end result. The medicine is the same, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I got to say that I have noticed real improvements. And I really appreciate kind of the levelness because I used to go through some pretty deep lows. I mean, my highs were not really like out of control manic, really. But my lows would be like, bro, this I'm not getting out of bed for at least a week here. Now where I just, I push, I push. And it's made a huge difference in my life. And I think the people who are in my circle of friends and the people who are in my life, they know there's a difference in me today than there was 2 years ago. And I know a lot of that has to do with that. And I'll kind of let you speak to that.
No, that's okay. There's a great, you can go online and Google, I think the search that I did was something like neurons and depression and anxiety. But what you're looking for is a Yale study that has it's only like a 2-minute video, and it talks about, what they're about glutamate and the GABA receptors, about neurotransmission, and about the relationship between those things and depression and anxiety. It's a wonderful, visual representation of it, but their analogy is like of super highways, right? And as the different symptomology of depression and anxiety, I mean, we all understand it's a cyclical thing, right? Something much like yourself, like pain or something like that, causes the breakdown of neurotransmission, whether it be from chemical imbalance, whether it be from actual physical trauma where we experience a brain injury, like whatever it is, this causes us to have these imbalances in serotonin and in dopamine, right? But also imbalances in serotonin and dopamine lead to more damage to our neurons and to that process of transmission, right? So when we're microdosing, it's like a traffic jam on the highways. And their video is really wonderful. But when I'm speaking with people, the way I visualize it best is like, if you're old like me, you can remember going to a library and using a card catalog, the Dewey Decimal System, right?
Right.
So we have like this whole library. I mean, and we all kind of know this because everybody knows about like hypnosis and all that kind of stuff. We have all these memories, we just lose access to them, right? We have all this knowledge. We like had these things that we were really good at when we were like 19 and 20, like painting or playing an instrument or whatever it was, right? And we don't think that we can do that anymore. Like we lost that knowledge or whatever it was. But the truth is that we've just lost access. That road is gone, or the card catalog that directs us to the place on the shelves where we can find that information is corrupted. And what microdosing does to you is it encourages something called neuroplasticity, right?
Yes.
All right. So there's 2 times in our physical being where our own hormones induce a process in our brain called neuroplasticity. And this is when the right and the left hemisphere of our brain are freely communicating. And this doesn't actually, as much as people would like to think this happens all through our life, that is not the way it works. So during these times, we're building new neural pathways for transmission of information, whether it be physically learning, like, whether it's your reflexes or it is learning how to read. All of these things, these are neural pathways that are being built or established. And when you have neuroplasticity, we can build new pathways. We can make a new card catalog. We can discard the old, unwritten, messed up cards, put new ones in, access all of the same books in our library, right? It's not like we're like learning new skills or that we are accessing information we didn't have. It's like you said, we're able to like remember the right word for that thing that we normally would have been like this forever for, right? Like now,
Yeah.
our language.
And the way it was
skills.
explained to me is the neuron has it's like cabling of a coax cable, and it starts to fray and sheathe and splinter and become disconnected. And as that healing happens, those pathways reconnect and those avenues of data start to flow. Because I'm
Right.
sure our brains are not much different than just a biological computing system.
So yeah, it is like a coaxial cable, right? But there's something at the end. There's at the end of our neurons, we have these things, these like receptors, and they're translators, right?
Yeah.
They're like saying, this is a message that means this goes to this is something we saw, this is something we heard, this is whatever it is. And our brain like translates the messages and sends them to the right place, and the healthier those neurons are, the faster that process happens and the better the translation is, right? So as we're experiencing brain trauma, we have chemical imbalances, we start to lose this ability to accurately transmit messages, and our translator gets busted. Right? Like all of a sudden shit gets lost in translation, and it's like the telephone game, right? Remember where it's like the telephone game, but in your brain, and you're like walking into a room and you're like, why the fuck did I come in here? It was a chair, was it a desk? What was I doing? Oh yeah, this paper I have in my hand. I needed to set it on this desk. I mean, like, how hard was it for me to come to that fucking, a chair, a desk, it's.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of like the microdosing is like a prophylactic or a lubricant to the cannabis use that we do, because I use my heavy use of cannabis over the years has affected my short-term memory and my memory in general. And I think to offset that with microdosing and use it as kind of like a protector, as a buffer to that, I wonder if there's some kind of correlation there that could be helpful to folks in the future,
Well, I mean, we all know that cannabis is a hell of a lot more potent today than it was when we started smoking it a long time ago. So we don't really understand the total impact of
dabbing
cannabis use. Yeah, like I'm a
Right.
dabber. I have been since I was sick with cancer, right? Because I moved to concentrates and started applying them topically and eating them and smoking them, right? Because I was doing it for all things. I was doing it for appetite, so I was smoking it. I was applying it topically because I had fucking cancer, and I was eating it because I was trying to kill the cancer from the inside, right? So I had all these concentrates. Weed doesn't work for me anymore. Like, people are passing around a pipe, it's ceremonial if I take a hit off of it more than anything.
Yeah. I still get ripped as fuck.
I wanted to touch on a couple of things. It's important to talk about, as much and as wonderful as all these things are. There are some people that should be really careful when they're taking, you should consult a doctor before microdosing, or should just look into it a little bit further, because microdosing psilocybin is actually not for everyone. As passionate as I am about it, and as much as I love this science, and as much as I'm going to keep doing this until something prevents me from it, there are people that shouldn't microdose. So I think it's important we talk about that. So schizophrenia is a disorder that you're talking about, those sheaths and how the coaxial cable. People that have schizophrenia have basically biologically been born without the coaxial, the lining, that, what they're ending up with is they're receiving those electrical impulses completely sans the translator. So
it's like the data's just jumping from bus to bus
straight into the midline, right? And so have you ever had, I used to, in way 20, 30 years ago, I used to like to put big, loud stereo systems in my car. And if you ever had a bad wire in your car that was touching ground, you had this like noise every time you turned on their stereo, like this background, right? And what that was just ambient electricity getting into the wire without the translator of your amp or stereo. It was just straight electricity. And that's what a schizophrenic's brain is. They're getting a straight electrical impulse, no translation. And much like in every phenomenon where a human sees something that they cannot calculate, our brain translates it into something we understand. So if we have some input of information that completely breaks our barriers of understanding, our brain will invent something that we do understand to explain what we just saw or heard or whatever. And the truth is that a schizophrenic brain is doing that on a constant basis. Right? They're constantly translating or they're constantly making something of untranslatable information. When you induce neuroplasticity, like you ramp up the electricity in the brain, basically, with microdosing in a schizophrenic brain, there's the potential for bad consequences. Now, it's true that there are studies that have shown that there are benefits to microdosing for schizophrenics. It's in a fully observed medical environment. And they're in constant observation. And it's the studies, the abstract that I read about the study that was done, there were points in the beginning where it induced bad things, but the overall outcome was found to be good. I don't recommend people that have schizophrenia out in just the normal world picking up microdosing and going with it. I just don't think. In addition to that, a common treatment for schizophrenia is lithium. And to my understanding right now, the only drug out there that they know has a negative interaction with is lithium. Lithium and psilocybin have shown that they will cause heart problems. So people who are taking lithium for any reason should also not microdose.
That's interesting. Yeah, because you could get lithium for maybe bipolar disorder or something else. Yeah. It was super interesting. I'm glad that you pointed those things out. We're coming into the last little part of the show here. So we're going to talk about your film project and things like that. But before we do get into that, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're like, hey, I'd rather listen to this while I'm on a walk or whatever, like a podcast or something like that, search Cannabis in the podcast app of your choice or Spotify, and you could be listening to this episode instead of just watching it. But all right, so let's talk about this film project of yours. I like the name, the question is, tell us about your film project, Mush Apocalypse. Is that the name, Mush Apocalypse? I like it.
So that's actually the artist who's doing the project, Mush Apocalypse. You can find him on Instagram. He's a great guy. He's done a lot of filming you can find some of his mushroom bits and stuff, even on like CNN and stuff like that. So big networks will reach out to him when they need like fast forwarded videography of the mushroom grow process or whatever. So he's a really interesting gentleman. And the project is amazing because what it is, it's about the grassroots psilocybin movement. So we're talking more along the lines of, eco-terrorism, where people are inoculating parks and environments so that psilocybin is available on large to the public so that...
Shout out knockers.
Yep, knockers, inoculators. That's what I'm talking about. So we're really lucky living here on the West Coast because we happen to be so close to some of the best inoculated cities in North America. So Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, you basically should be able to find ovoids popping up here pretty soon in most parks, public parks, where they spread new wood chips every year. Some of the best, in fact, to my understanding, most of the best wild psilocybin varieties are wood lovers. And so you'll be finding a lot of those right now coming up here in the spring. Ovoids in particular here in the Pacific Northwest are pretty easy to identify. So if you make sure that if you are picking wild psilocybin, that there are things that you have to take into consideration. You always want to look at your stem. You want to flip it over. You want to look at your cap. You're going to need to get a spore print because you want to know what the color of the spores are and the overall look of the mushroom. Before you pick any mushroom and stick it in your freaking mouth, please do your research, because you can only pick a bad mushroom once.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if you can partner up with a community of folks, if you can find someone who's got a lot of, or even just a good amount of experience to kind of take you out and show you, because there is some trickery to be had, and the outcome is, like you said, not good. So talk about a little more about your involvement with the film, and what the segments are going to be and what the people can expect.
So I'm not a big player in this. All I'm doing a lot like what I'm doing right now, just talking about microdosing, what it means to me, and how I'm making it available to the people in my community. But in general, I can't express how much you as a viewer would want to watch this once he releases it, because what we're talking about is all of the people that are taking part in this movement, all the way from the people who are providing the spores en masse to these groups of people that are inoculating the parks, all the way up to people like myself who are taking the medicine and putting it together and providing it to people for their mental health, right? And he's talking about it. He's a really good, he has a very good mix of the people that would be involved in this process. Everyone from like the scientific community who talks, like the labs where they do the testing and stuff like that. He'll talk with those people specifically, all the way down to the little small people like me who just make the microdoses.
That's that touches my heart, because at Cannabis, we really want to represent everybody who puts the seed in the ground to the smoke in the air, and everybody in between. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that you just said that. So how can folks see this project and get involved with supporting the project?
So my understanding is that they have to shoot a little bit more footage. He's trying to get a little bit so we did an inoculation party last year that we did some footage at. It was a really awesome event. We had a great time, but he's trying to wrap that up by coming back this spring, to get some footage of that stuff that we, of the spores we spread last.
The fruits of your labor.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this project is on delay, not because there's any barriers, but we're waiting for nature to play her part. So we're waiting for Mother Nature to do her interview, and then he'll be wrapping that all up. And then I understand, I think the last time we discussed it, he was looking at releasing it at one of the independent film festivals. So I would, if I were you guys, and just because this footage is great anyways, I would follow Mush Apocalypse online. And then I'm sure that he'll be releasing more information as soon as the video drops.
Awesome.
I repost his stuff on Instagram all the time. His IG posts are amazing.
Right?
Just the time lapse of everything and the sceneries. Yeah. I dig that so much. I mean, I love it. So yeah, shout out. You'll see him reposted on my stuff, and keep doing the good work, you guys. I can't tell you how stoked I am for this community.
Yeah. Well, if you guys want me to, I have the stuff here to make a dose of microdoses and show you how it's done, or I can come back another time and make them for you guys. That's up to you.
Q has the new baby. I'll let him make that call.
Maybe what we could do is we could even do like just a separate video or something like that.
I would love that.
Yeah, and we could just do that. And maybe we'll just connect sometime and just do a real quick video where we're talking about that, and then we could like release it as its own thing. Maybe.
I think that's great. That's up to you.
That would be cool.
Watch it that way. Instead of like a longer interview or whatever. Well, cool. This has been a lot of fun. I had a great question that came in from our community. So, like at the top of the show, I mentioned we have our cannabis community. So, if folks have been enjoying the show, you can join our community. It really helps us just keep the machine rolling and helps us send out giveaway prizes and things like that. So, with that all said, Psych Doctor 74 asked, so with heart issues, is it safe to microdose or use psilocybin? Any thoughts on
so right
precautions?
now there's ongoing studies right now about the risk of psilocybin and congenital heart failure. So I'm looking into that myself. I've got a person that I've been speaking with that I'm doing the research specifically to make sure, because there are people, when I start meeting with people, the first thing I ask them is what medications they're on and what medical conditions they have, because I am not a medical professional, so I'm not prepared. If there's any question, then I just decline. You know what I mean? I'm not the person to provide it to everybody. If there's any question that your safety might be in question, then I just will probably decline. So I'm looking into congestive heart failure, and my understanding is that there is some risk. I think that it's important on that front to wait for more research to come out.
Right.
Like I said, especially with them finding that the combination of lithium and psilocybin does cause heart problems, to me, that means there's a propensity that might be an issue with other medications. But so far, I haven't found any others that are specifically mentioned.
She has ran into somebody that was looking for an experience with psilocybin and actually had heart palpitations and talked about his issue prior to his trip. And when he had a trip, he damn near called the emergency room because he was tripping about his heart palpitation.
That's this
also
is not a microdose.
Right.
It's not a microdose, but you also have to take that in consideration because mind altering. And if you have a medical problem, a hindrance, you definitely have to think about what's going to happen with that mentally.
Yeah. So if you're using mushrooms medicinally, but you are using a mega dose and you're not microdosing, definitely think about heart conditions. Microdosing, though, the right microdose, you should not feel physically at all. The right microdose, you should notice almost immediately an effect in your cognitive functions and how you deal with your day, but you should never physically feel a microdose or it's too potent, period. It's not
I would agree with that.
If you get high.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. And I know I also want to kind of shout out that I know you and Chef are very generous to the veteran community.
Yeah,
and
so we do like to provide both mushrooms and microdoses to the community at large, free of charge on an individual person-to-person basis. Please don't hit us up for a pound of mushrooms because we're not those kind of people. But if you are a veteran, especially a veteran of a foreign war who's experiencing problems with your mental health, you can contact Chef Sebastian Carosi or myself, and we or JR Token, and he can reach out to us too. It's either way. Get a hold of Cannabis, get a hold of one of us. We'll provide you with the start of this process free of charge. We believe in it that much. So
thank you. I appreciate that. And just kind of a little shout out to the veterans. We got more stuff coming. TikiMadMan has got some stuff cooking for y'all. So to all our veterans out there, we love you and we support you.
Hell yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Carla. We really appreciate it. I know it was a little touch and go earlier. I was stuck dropping off some trash.
Dump traffic. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently everyone wanted to drop off trash today at the Napa transfer station or whatever. But yeah, thanks everyone who watched. Thanks to everyone in our cannabis community. We had a really great crew of the OGs. We had 420 grams, Crazy Pop Mom, Dollar Bill, Psych Doctor, and Cake all in the chat today. That was cool. So shout out.
Joining us, everybody.
Yeah, it was really cool and a great question there at the end from Psych Doctor. So if you want to be part of that crew, again, search up Cannabis. Thanks to all of our sponsors and supporters. The reason why we bring on supporters or sponsors like that is they help us go to festivals or shows, or like JR when he goes
Talking to the microphone.
yeah, when he gets a new microphone and things like that. So we really appreciate all that support, and for folks sitting through the ads that we do, and please support the sponsors. It helps keep the train a rolling. But thanks, Carla. Thanks everyone for watching.
Bye, everybody.
We really appreciate your time, and as always, JR.
Growers
Growers
love.
love. Peace, everyone.